All right, welcome again, everyone. Thank you for being here for the ABFMP Association of Black Family Medicine Physicians Family Medicine Career Panel. This is our first year doing this, so in recommendation of you all. So we're happy to provide this for you all. This particular session is directed towards those who are particularly looking for career development as well as jobs. So particularly the PGY2s, PGY3s, but it's never too early to start to gather that information to kind of really determine what you want your career to look like. So I wanted to first start with introducing myself. I'm Dr. Ryan Walker. I will be the moderator today. I'm also the executive director of ABFMP. And so just kind of like overall, we'll start with a poll and then we'll have each of our panelists introduce themselves and then we'll ask a few preset questions and we'll open it all up to you all. We really want this to be a session for you all to get your questions answered, and it's really just a discussion, honestly. So you can put your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves to ask questions once we do the prepped questions. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start the poll to get us started. So it shouldn't be a long poll. We just kind of want to know where you all are in your careers, to see who we have with us, what your expectations were for today's session, and kind of just get an understanding of some of the exposure that you've already had about the topics that we'll be talking about today. So I do encourage you all to partake in that for the next minute or so. You all see that poll on your screens. Panelists don't have to do it. You guys busy, can't answer? I'm not seeing them coming up. I just want to make sure you all can see it. Is that correct? Okay, perfect. I'll give you all another few seconds to answer those. Thank you. All right, they're coming in now. I know some people are multitasking as well. All right, we'll give it 2 more seconds and then we'll end that poll and then we'll get started. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So we kind of have a mix here. So we have like an M3, a medical graduate, PGY3, everyone didn't answer, but it seems like there'll be some learning today related to some of the various career options. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that. And then I'm just going to download those results. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start in my screen with the panelists introduce themselves. So Dr. Brave, you may introduce yourself.
Hey, good evening, y'all. My name's Dr. Lance Bray. I graduated from the Lawrence Family Medicine residency back in June with the amazing Dr. Ryan Walker. Before then, I went to Medical University of South Carolina for medical school, did undergrad at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. And now I'm in private practice in family medicine in Newberry, South Carolina, which is a rural area doing full spectrum family medicine with OB, rounding in the hospital, seeing patients in the clinic, getting into any kind of trouble I want because we can do that because we're independent private practice, but that's me.
Great, thanks you. Dr. Kazossi.
Yes, thank you for having me here. So yes, I'm Dr. Ramla Kasozi. I completed my residency actually in 2021 of June at the University of Minnesota. I actually did my medical training in Uganda, East Africa, my undergrad in Canada, but I also have my MPH from Emory University. So I like to say that I have degrees in different countries, which is kind of, humbling that I've been able to move around and see health in different perspectives and have a lens on healthcare. But currently I'm at Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, where I'm actually part of faculty as an assistant professor, but I also see patients in the clinic. I do round in the hospital, which is really great. I'm very passionate about hospital medicine, but also like full spectrum family medicine and improving like medical education. So that's kind of my niche as to how do we improve our education, our training that's more relevant to the society we live in, especially talking about health disparities and creating curriculums that are anti-racism in nature. So those are my interests currently. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Dr. Harvey.
Hey, so my name is Dr. Keisha Harvey Mansfield. I graduated residency in 2015 at the LSU Rural Family Medicine residency here in Bogalusa, Louisiana. I currently live in Covington, but I still am in private practice in Bogalusa, Louisiana. I've been in practice for 7 years now. Hopefully, we're gonna head into 8 in April. I graduated from Meharry Medical College. My goals are to kind of transition more so into obesity medicine. I'm sitting for my board Saturday. Pray for me. I have a couple nurse practitioners working for me. So I want them to continue on with the more primary care aspect of my practice, and I will do so too. But my ultimate goal is just to focus on obesity.
Nice. And I want to add that Dr. Harvey is a solo owner of her practice. And I'm happy to hear that you've been expanding. So that was new information to me. Dr. Daywalker, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Mark Daywalker. I am a graduate of the Morehouse School of Medicine. For medical school, for residency training, I am family medicine trained from the University of Medical Branch. I currently serve as the Chief Health Equity and Wellness Officer for my community health center, which is Access Health. I kind of look at it as two really big aims in that specific role. Is that one, I'm creating a sustainable solution for our value-based care as we pivot towards that, as well as kind of being in charge of our employees like health and well-being. And I still have 0.5 FTE, like half time, still doing primary care services. Thank you all for having me.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go ahead with our first question. What helped you all to prepare for the job that you are currently in?
Can I start by answering this question?
Yes.
Because I can say nothing, absolutely nothing. Private practice has been the hardest thing, and it is not for those who are faint of heart. It's definitely for me been on the job training, and I would have never thought 8 years ago, or even 9 years, when even in medical school, that I would ever be in private practice. My mom sent me a book when I was in residency about how to start a private practice, and I thought she was crazy. I worked for an FQHC, and I hated how I didn't have control over my schedule, and I don't like being told what to do. So I thought, well, I'll go into private practice. And so I did. I left them in January and April. We were open. And that's before we even finished credentialing, because I didn't know how important credentialing was at the time. And it's just luckily I hired people that I really cared for. The people I started with at my FQHC, they followed me. And so the thing that has kept me into private practice is I can't fail them. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to let them down. And they're mothers, and they're my, I don't want to say friend, but friends. And that was a big mistake that I made, because when it comes time to let your friends go, because they're not doing their job, is very heart-wrenching and difficult. And so the best advice I got was from a billionaire when I went to Essence E-Suites ceremony or what have you. She said she is slow to hire, quick to fire. Well, I am slow to hire. I'm also even slower to fire, because I like to give people chances or what have you. But I also have in my mind that these are deal breakers, lying, stealing, and also just lack of professionalism. So nothing prepared me for private practices, by the grace of God, that we are still open, and that financially it has made sense. Because I know, especially during the pandemic, it didn't make sense for a lot of people.
Yes, thank you for that. And we'll get into some more. I'm sure lots of people have questions about that. Dr. Kasosi, it looks like you want to go?
Yeah, I can go. I think, like Dr. Harvey said, nothing really prepares you, but I think for me, I had an idea what I wanted to do, I know, after residency. I know, so I trained, as I mentioned earlier, at University of Minnesota, and that was the time of, George Floyd and COVID. So we were just thick in that. And I was also looking at the training I was receiving, where I felt it was not really relevant to the changing times. As everyone has probably gone through their training, there's just a lot of racism, overt or subconscious during our training. And it was just a lot. And so I knew that I wanted to go to a place where, okay, the only way these people will respond to things that have to change is through research, through data. And so I knew that I needed to go to a place where I can still practice medicine, but I get that room to do research and scholarly work. I like that. I mean, I do like patients, of course, but I felt like there's another part of me that I felt like, okay, I need to invest in research. And so for me personally, I was looking for a place that offers that offers me room to do research, see patients, and also hospital medicine. Now, I did know that I would sacrifice my schedule not being in control. And that's the thing that you kind of have to give up. When you're looking for a job, there's those concessions you have to make. And also for me, I'm married with 2 children. My husband is also a physician. He's internal medicine, but doing infectious disease fellowship. So he's here also in Florida. So that was another decision. Like it kind of guided me to, like, I was going to end up in Florida. It was just a matter of where. And so when I did my research, I decided on Mayo just because it does have one, I'll be honest, economy, it is tight. There's a lot of things have hit COVID financially, economically. And so you have to think about, okay, if I do something, how is there stability in that organization? So of all the health, care centers, I felt Mayo was really good on that. And then it offered some research space and also allowed me to do a lot of work in academia. So that's kind of what guided me. But I do agree, they kind of have allowed me some room to play with my schedule, but not as much as I want. But I realized that was a concession I had to make. So I had a lot of variables just because I have a kid, 2 daughters and my husband and my interests to kind of decide where I'm going. So I'm only a year into this, a year and a half. So we'll see, so far, so good. I'm enjoying the journey. Still going through those growing pains, but I've appreciated it. But I've spoken to other people who have tried academia, then transitioned out, or vice versa. So yeah, so far, so good. That's it.
Yeah.
I'd like to piggyback off what Dr. Harvey was saying as like the other person in private practice here. So I did a little different. I joined a practice that was established and like, I'm an employee there, and then like after a year or so, I'll come up for ownership if I want to stay or not. But for me, I'll say like what prepared me coming into the job. I like thrive off of optimism, so I always feel like my whole life has always prepared me for whatever I'm about to do. And I feel like just growing up in a small town, very similar to the town that I practice in, going to military school, being in a residency program where like a lot of times you just got used to having to be somebody who's whatever kind of specialist because of their financial situation, they couldn't get anywhere. I feel like prepared me perfectly for doing rural private practice. And I mean, I really feel like I'm living the dream every day. But Dr. Walker could speak to it that I didn't always see that. When I came in to medical school, came into residency, I always knew I wanted to have my own clinic. Like I knew I wanted, like the goal is always go back to my hometown, set up like my clinic or whatever. One of my friends who graduated high school with me, he's in family medicine residency right now. So we're gonna partner up and we're gonna friggin' save South Carolina some way, somehow. And in life throws curveballs at you. And, so I'm currently not in my hometown, but I'm in a place that's just like it. And, I feel like this is a spot that we could actually do the work and turn things around here in the South, starting in South Carolina from Newberry. And so I think a lot of it also just be like, just having faith. Because again, Dr. Walker could tell you if she wanted to tell you everything, because she was kind of my vent buddy through it all. Like I was scared, y'all. Like, you come through medical school and residency and all you know is academics and all your attendings know is academics. I only had like one of my attendings as being like, I really think you should do private practice. And similar to Dr. Harvey, I knew I hated my schedule in residency at NFQHC, and I could see what my attendees were going through. I was like, I can't go out like that. And I really, don't like being told what I can and can't do. I don't like being told, hey, you could change the system, and then be like, oh, actually, you can't do that. So, I knew I really didn't want to be in academics. I knew I really didn't want to do this stuff. I wanted to be just out there, boots on the ground, working in the community, doing whatever the heck I wanted to do. And if I fail, so what? It's my fault and I'll pay for it. And I found that, and it's been really dope. In the situation I'm in now, it really let me kind of spread my wings. I'm writing a monthly column for the local newspaper about health topics. I've been able to really work on creating social media content just to get, good information out there. So yeah, I say that's what prepared me. And I would give that to y'all as advice. Even when you think you can't do this, because a lot of us are coming in as first gen doctors and stuff like that, you're ready for it. Everything you've been through has built you for it. And every time you go in that clinic room or OR, whatever you're doing, all your life experience is going to help you do what you got to do.
Thank you for that. Dr. Daywalker, anything you want to add before we move to the next question?
I'm not sure if there's much more I can add, kind of following everybody there, but what I will say is listen to my fellow panelists. I think we're kind of all saying the same thing. It sounds like a spirit of being open-minded, flexible, and leveraging your willpower is going to get you to where you need to get to. And I'll speak directly towards that in terms of my executive role. I'll tell you kind of how kind of COVID prepared me for this one. I was fresh out of residency, starting this role at Access Health, just being a primary care doc, doing the community health center thing. And literally 1 or 2 months into the role, I got offered a chance to lead an organizational transformation for trauma-informed care. Some of you guys may be familiar, some of you guys are not, but it's a really big hot topic around mental health right now, trauma-informed care. But I essentially got voluntold to do it. So I signed up to do it. And then literally 2 months later, COVID-19, the pandemic hit. And, if you can think back to that time, the health center, not health centers, but health systems altogether were kind of just trying to figure this thing out. So by me being open-minded and flexible, I took what was already established for what we were going to do for this health center transformation. Instead of just kind of focusing on the patients, I applied it to our employees because I really needed to support their emotional and mental well-being to kind of continue to do the work that we were kind of asked to do. And from that, it just blossomed into me becoming our director of health and well-being. Started leading a lot of interventions, got some data around that. We were able to kind of improve overall well-being from the WHO standards. We increased compassion satisfaction. We decreased burnout. A whole lot of stuff kind of came from that was really good. And that kind of leveraged or gave me the opportunity to become what I do now as the Chief Health Equity and Wellness Officer. And what I'll say, just kind of to culminate what everyone's saying, is that you guys have the will, the skill, and all the components necessary to do what you want, but you got to get activated and be flexible.
Thank you for that. I want to acknowledge that Dr. Kassosi is going to have to leave a little bit early. Get questioner related to academia. And so the next question is what advice do you have for embarking the job search process, and particularly related to ensuring that you're having appropriate conversation, optimal work environments?
Okay. Should I answer that first?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a great question too, I think. So my program, I can say that they did offer us, I remember we had a separate kind of didactic to understand types of avenues that you can go into, either if you want to do private, rural. In Minnesota, a lot of people kind of stay in Minnesota and stay rural. So they kind of push that. Yes, there's academia. I'll be honest with you, a lot of people actually, they kind of pushed us more to rural instead of academia. They felt that you needed to do a lot of years before you really got into the academia. And I was actually one of a person where they were surprised I even got an academic position, right out of residency. And so like Dr. Bray said earlier, you got to believe and be optimistic, because I knew I wanted to do something like that, because I felt my training, it was great, but things could be improved. And so with that, understanding I wanted to understand, okay, in academia, definitely you got to understand what the job market is like. It also depends where you're planning to move. I think we kind of forget that. You'll find there's this culture of really not understanding how much we earn. And even if somebody's working, people will not share their salaries. And so the first thing I did was found a recruiter who understood the Florida market. And this is something where I use something called Practice Link. But I was lucky because my husband was already like 5 years into working already. He was a hospitalist before doing infectious disease. So he was like my guidance counselor, I called it. So he kind of said, okay, you need to find a recruiter, but also finding a recruiter can be very difficult. So if you don't feel somebody, like you don't get that vibe, it's okay to have multiple recruiters. I literally had 4 different recruiters just searching jobs. And then it was them I actually had, sometimes they offer these conversations, 30-minute conversations for free, figure out, okay, what's the job market? How much am I going to get paid? What is the schedule like? How many hours am I going to work? What is the patient? Another thing which I failed to ask, but I found out when I got hired, was patient panel. As family medicine physicians, people don't realize the average family medicine doctor may have 2,000 patients on their panel. And that takes a couple years to reach. That could be quite overwhelming. Whereas at least if you're in academic area, that number kind of goes down because they allow you freedom to do research and whatnot, right? So you also have to be mindful about that. If you're looking at raising, like if you're trying to build a patient panel of 2,000, just know you'll probably get a lot of new patients, and you're averaging, depending on the practice, at least seeing close to, in some places I've seen, I have colleagues, maybe 16 to 20 patients a day, 4 to 5 days a week. So you have to think of those numbers and your mental well-being. Can you do that? Right? Then another thing is, do you want to do pure outpatient or do you want to mix it up? And that was another thing I spoke with my recruiter, that for me personally, I like to have my day very different. I don't want to just always be, in the outpatient. I want to be inpatient. Sometimes we get some community work, and then I also do some teaching, and I precept with the residents. So I have that diverse workflow in a week. So those are the questions I was lucky to have a recruiter who I can ask those questions to. And they said, oh, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Another thing you got to think about, which is very important, is credentialing, especially if you're moving to another state. Credentialing for some people can take 90 days, if not 90 days, sometimes 6 months. So if you're PGY3, I usually tell people start in December or January if you know where you want to go and what you want to do, because that process may take up until the time you graduate. Otherwise, there might be that 2-month area where you're broke, and so you got to figure out, okay, am I willing to be broke? Which actually, I'll be honest with you, I took 3 months, actually it was almost 4 months off between residency and starting my job, but I was lucky because my husband was working. So we had income. And so that's something you also have to think about, is that, can I take a break between residency and starting? And what is my income going to look like? So those are questions to think about as you're job searching, is where do you want to go? What is the market? What is the base salary? How many patients am I going to see? What is my typical week going to look like? And then do I have income between residency and starting my job? Do I want a break? Oh yes, another thing to ask is PTO. How many days of PTO do I get? How many vacation days do I get? How many CME days do I get, which are different from PTO days? And what credit card do you give me to go to those CMEs? I later found out on the job, well, thankfully Mayo does give us some sort of bursary of sorts. I think most people should, but it also depends on the amount. Some people may offer you $5,000 up to $10,000 a year just to use for CME travel. So look at that. Yep, it is there. So something to think about. I think that's it for now.
Yes, thank you for that. I think the experience of using a physician recruiter is really a valued one, and having different recruiters. Could you speak a little bit about what that experience was like? Because some people have like I've heard it was like, well, how do I know? Like, what is the motive of the physician recruiter? Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, and so I was very blunt with some of them. I'm like, if I want your service, do I have to pay you? Like that's what I asked. Like, it's like, oh no, it's actually the private practice or the company that pays them to find people like you. But I think it's very important to have that out in the open and say, do I pay you? Or if I get hired, do I have to give you anything? Because I too wasn't sure. And so it's very important to do that. And I think also think about leveraging what you have, be confident in your skills. Like if you talk to a recruiter and they say, oh, the most you can get is probably 210, 220, and just say, no, I want 250, I want 260 a year, and tell them, can you find a place close to that? But it depends. If 4 recruiters are telling you 220, then most likely the market is 220. But I do encourage you to find, I personally had, I think like 3 or 4 recruiters just to see what their situation was like, to see if they really scavenged the area. But I did have one recruiter from Mayo, one from Essentia, like from different health system. But then I had one who was not affiliated with that, just to see if she could find me anything else. I was this close to entering private practice, but I think their patient panel was a little too much for me. So I wasn't ready for those numbers, I'll be honest. I think that's, anything else?
Thank you for that. And I think your point to the credentialing, I just want to highlight that we just had a session last month of credentialing and privileging. So that is available for members who are on the website to go watch. That was a really important one. So for the other panelists, the same question, I'm going to repeat it because I know it's just so you remember, but is to advice for embarking on the job search process.
My best advice is word of mouth, because that's how I got my first job with the FQHC. My program director and my program coordinator, they were always getting these requests, for physicians to come, review these different jobs or visit the sites. And so, I'm a lazy hard worker, meaning it's just some things I don't want to put my energy towards. And so, when I was embarking on finding a job, I was like, Jesus, you know me. So wherever you want me to be, let me be there. And so my program director, he told me about a few jobs. And then it was one where he said that they were looking for someone here in Bogalusa. And I was like, well, I don't really want to stay here in Bogalusa. That's not what my spirit told me. And then the thing that stuck out that made me stay was the person who wanted a physician from our program was looking for someone who would see the job as mission work. And so, wherever I was planted or transplanted, I wanted to make sure that, one, I was going to earn a good salary. So I decided, I picked my number. My number was 200,000. And 2, that people valued what I did and that I was really making a difference. And so I met, her name was Liz Teague. And she was like, I just really want someone who sees this community, as, a service, not so much the money and, the brains. It's a given. I know, if you're graduating, you worked hard, you got the brains. And so that was it for me. Now, when I got hired, I think about, the guy who played on Grey's Anatomy. I think, they did the meme where before you get the job and you get the job, that's how it was for me. They loved me. They rolled out the red carpet. When I signed my name, the ink dried. It was okay. This is how it's going to be. And so after I was leaving, one of the older docs at the FQHC that I worked at, he told me, one Doc Cafe, it's a lot of online sites that basically jobs pay into this service so that, they can recruit or find a physician for them. And so Doc Cafe was one of the sites I signed up for. And I'm always getting emails from them about, potential job openings. But when I went into private practice, that was a little bit different. I remember in residency, med school, I shadowed a physician who owned 4 practices, and he was living good. But I didn't have his number anymore. So it was just basically, I went to the AFP NCCL conference, nickel conference is what we call it. And another girl, she was going into private practice. So we basically shared notes. And the difference between she and I is I'm doing rural family medicine. So most of my patient population is Medicaid. I would love to see 16 patients a day, but most days I see 25. And this year I decided to cut back my patient panel just because of my mental health. And so, of course, my bank account reflected that. And so something that I've learned, where my site or my job is working on FQHC designation or rural health designation. So we're going the rural route because it seems like a little bit easier. And so, 60% of our patient panel is Medicaid. That's why we have to work so hard. And so, when you're going into private practice, you need to, one, decide if this is something that you want to do to have a comfortable life. And if so, your Medicaid patient panel is going to be small, and you're going to either do DPC, concierge medicine, or make sure you have mostly Medicare or private payer source. For me, it was more so, like I said, even when I left, I didn't care about the money because luckily I'm a person who loves a simple life, and my husband is too. We don't really care about cars, flashy things. We still make 6 figures. I'm sorry, I had to throw that out there. Sorry. But now it's kind of like I have 2 kids versus when I first opened, it was just me and my husband. And so now it takes about a year to become a rural health clinic. We're 6 months in. So hopefully by next year we'll have that. And, my nurse practitioners can see 20 to 24 patients a day. And then I can go down to the 12 to 16 patients a day because that's not how I was created. And like I said, once again, my focus is going to be obesity medicine. I want to educate physicians and patients more on obesity, how to treat it, the different treatment options. I want to do Instagram, and I can put that in my schedule and do talks on Instagram and Facebook. So I'm trying to make one last thing. If you host a Zoom meeting and your patients hop on, you can bill for that. And so that's something that I'm working on now too. You can actually bill for a group visit and they reimburse at the same rate as if you were like churning them out, going from room to room. So that's something that we're playing with right now. And I'm really excited about that. So that's my journey into getting different jobs.
Thank you for that. So we're going to come back around to this question. I just want to be respectful of Dr. Kososi's time and ask if there's any questions for Dr. Kososi before she has to go. If not, we did have one last question for her, but I want to give people a chance to ask before she leaves. You can either unmute yourself or you can type in the chat. The question that we did have as people may be thinking is, you mentioned that you have a really great experience in academia. I think some of the concerns, especially with hearing a lot in, people kind of expressing more of their experience within academia is like, especially as a person of color, but like, how do you go about minimizing the minority tax within academia because there are so few of us? And then also the hierarchy of sometimes, I think you're not in the traditional academia, like with med schools and trying to become tenured and all of those aspects. But if you can talk specifically to the minority tax within academia and how you try to mitigate that.
Yeah, excellent question. And that's something I was very mindful about when I was looking for a job, especially when I was being recruited. So, with Mayo Clinic in the Department of Family Medicine, there are actually, I was pretty impressed. There are several, like about 5 of us who are, identify as Black, African American, so which is very nice, but I'm like the only Muslim female Black person there, which is okay too. And the chair of that department, I actually felt a good connection with him, because I've been very open and honest about, as a Black person, I do not want to do everything that has to deal with DEI. I was very upfront because I didn't want to be the token person. And I'll be honest with you, I was kind of exhausted of doing that in residency, right? I said, heck, I just want to see what, can I write a paper about ankle pain? You know what I mean? I just wanted to do something academic. But at the same time, I expressed my interest in curriculum development, because I feel like that needs to change. We need a shift on that. And so I was very open about that. And so I think what's important is creating boundaries and realizing and being honest about those boundaries and being upfront with them. That's very important. That's what I've learned. Now, a year into Mayo, I'll be honest, I've been approached by various committees and subcommittees who want me to be involved in various works that relate to DEI. I have issues with DEI, and I feel like that's another Zoom conference. But I've had to say, you know what? Not at this time. I prefer to really look at something specific, which is curriculum development, because I feel like DEI is not quite addressing that at the moment. And so I've remained true to why I'm here. Mm-hmm. This is what I want to do. I want to do curriculum development. I want to do research surrounding that. I've told some subcommittees whereby, I just don't have the bandwidth for that. And they even ask why. It's like, the problem is we sit here, we have a kumbaya session, but another thing is that they don't pay you to be on those things. And that's another thing I learned, is that if I'm going to do something, I want to be compensated. Mm-hmm. So, and what I have done is request protected time. So luckily I've been granted research time. And that's something I had to prove. Before I didn't. I was having clinic 5 days a week, seeing patients, which I didn't mind, but I was like seeing other people getting research time. I'm like, how do I do that? Now, thankfully, I've met a group of female Black physicians. We even have a WhatsApp group. So I found a village. And that's another thing that's important wherever you go, especially if you're not in private, that I found a group of Black female physicians who are higher up in the hierarchy of leadership, who have given me those tricks and tips. Oh, if you apply for a grant, you'll get this protected time, you get this research time, or you get this compensation. And so it's trying to be smart to find what are those opportunities. So a village is very important. And these are the women who tell me how I should navigate certain avenues, or what do I need to do to move up the ranks? And how do I say no very politely to things which are just going to be a waste of my time? Another thing I've tried to do, and very upfront to maintain my wellness and avoid minority tax, I'm very vocal about, if anything happens after 5, I say no. Work meetings, honestly, I'll be honest with you, I can't do work meetings after 5, because after 5, I've become a mother. Mm-hmm. To the point that I've refused to chart after 5. I do not open Epic. Epic shuts down at 5 p.m. It took a while to get there, I'll be honest, but I remember residency, I did that. And my kids are now 11 and 9, but I lost 3 years with them because of just residency and charting all the way until 11. I was like, that is not healthy, not normal. So in my head, I'm like, I don't care how many open charts I have. I'm not opening Epic after 5. And so sometimes they have this tendency of also having work meetings after 5. And I'm like, I'm not paid to work after 5. And I was very honest with my chair and even my assistant. I'm like, I don't get paid to work after 5. If we're going to have a meeting, it has to be during lunch hour, work hours, whatever it is. I'd rather eat my lunch and have the meeting instead of after 5. So that's how I've tried to do to avoid that minority task, is say no a lot. And I'm okay with that. Apply for research time, which I've been granted. I'm now applying for a grant so I get more time. And so that I get money also, because what they look for, they need boots on the ground. So in order to not be on the floors, you got to find a funding that will replace you for not being on the floor. And that is through grants. So those are the tips and tricks. Finding a village, very important, I think, because you need people who've been in the system to show you those tricks. And thank goodness I'm with a female group. We call ourselves the Mayo Magical Women. So there is, and we call ourselves the Mayo Melanin. So just know In places like Mayo, I know a lot of people look at it and they think, oh my God, this bougie place, or, you know, whatever. But just know we are also doing the work. There are Black people who come to Mayo. I mean, these are high-end Jay-Z, Beyonce level Black people, but they also get mistreated. You know, it's just ridiculous, the racism that exists even at Mayo, at upper class Black people, I call them. So this work is not only in the rural, it's also in places like Mayo, where we're also trying to push for, you know, to kind of close those gaps for us. So that's what I can offer for now.
Thank you so much. I know we are a little past your time, and we really appreciate you and really dropping the knowledge about setting very clear expectations and sticking to those boundaries and communicating those boundaries, so we're not getting stuck into things that we aren't in line with our goals. There weren't any questions in the chat, so I'm gonna, if you have to go, Dr. Kazosi, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And this won't be the last time that you see her. So
yeah, and thank you for having me. I've put my email, you know, please feel free to reach out to me. You know, I'm always here to pay it forward, okay?
thank you so much.
Yeah, all right, take care, have a good night.
So we do want to open it up to you all to ask any other questions, if you have any, so that you guys can get things addressed. I'm gonna give it a minute. I'm okay with silence. Again, you can unmute yourself or put questions in the chat. All right. Continue to put them in the chat. Thanks. So I'm going to go to the directed questions. Dr. Daywalker, so you are in his executive leadership within a community health center. You also are doing some things aside from the community health center. Can you
Dr. Walker, you're frozen.
speak to, like, oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. That's my internet. I was saying that given your role in as an executive leader, particularly in a community health center, and I know that you're also doing some other leadership aspects outside of that, could you speak to perhaps your top 3 recommendations on how to position oneself to become an executive leader?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm gonna piggyback to the previous question in a second here. So my top 3 would be to be open-minded, and this is going into one, but be open-minded and actively look for opportunities to engage with interdisciplinary teams. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, if you don't know these terms already, look them up. Practice empathetic and team-based leadership. And then number 3, always look to undersell yourself to whatever the industry standard or minimums are, while all the time knowing that your unique value proposition and you just being amazing is going to put you over whatever it is the industry standard is for that position. Because what that allows you to do is that you become that you become perceived as the very humble superstar, right? It allows you, whenever you're not in other spaces where new things are coming down the pipe or people just looking for people on teams, your name recurrently gets brought up as either a thought partner with those new initiatives, or they see you or want you to be a part of that integral team. And once you have that social capital, as well as your outcomes that you're producing very well as a provider, your opportunities become limitless. So that's my 3 things there. I do want to piggyback to the previous question about, I think it had the spirit around like what to look for jobs or something like that. What I will say, and I think both panelists really spoke to it, is that you want to do something that's really mission driven, that just has alignment with whatever you see your purpose in life to be. I say that because yes, the money's nice. Yes, the benefits package is not like, yeah, all of that stuff is true, but you still have to do the work day in and day out. And if you're not being fulfilled with the work day in and day out, you will burn out. You won't perform to your highest ability. Your patients will feel it, your colleagues will feel it. So make sure that first and foremost, you're signing up to do something that really fulfills your mission. And then secondarily, here's some very tangible things to do for that first job or that next job. Number one, go into it knowing that yes, the organization or the practice gets to name the price. Yes, you do get to negotiate as high as you can try to get from them, but they still get to tell you the price, but you get to set the terms, right? I heard someone mention PTO. I heard someone mention CME days, all that stuff. After they set the price, you get to negotiate the terms, okay? The next really big piece of that is always sign for 1 year. Bet on yourself, right? The reason why I say this is because after that 1 year, guess what? You get to name your price. Because now they fell in love, they fall in love with you. You have built up your patient panel and they see your outcomes. One of the number one things that businesses, organizations, you name it, do not want to do is to deal with the replacement costs and retention costs from losing a doc. Because you lose money with that doc leaving immediately from that patient panel. And we're talking about millions of dollars, guys, right? That's the reason why you get a 6-figure salary. It is millions of dollars, right? So that threat of you leaving is very real and tangible. Secondarily, so they got that loss from you seeing patients. Secondarily, they have that interval loss as well, right? When they have this gap. So they're losing money on that end. And then it takes money to onboard people, right? So you start to see that there's a cost gap that they're afraid of. And you got to understand that you have that kind of power. So you will be able to name your price after that 1 year. And I'll stop there. But yeah, I just wanted to add that piece to it. And okay, here's the last thing I'll say too, because I heard people mention numbers about salaries and stuff like that. I hope we don't fall into this thinking that money's going to make us happy, right? As physicians, we make a really good salary. I think research has been done over this. Believe it or not, guys, after $70,000, usually that extra bump of salary in terms of happiness starts to have diminishing returns, right? So I'll tell you personally, a personal story from mine. I had a job opportunity to be a chief medical officer for a community health center that was going to pay me $310,000 in Austin. Amazing spot, amazing direction they wanted to go with. I would have had full autonomy, but my wife wasn't on board. We wouldn't have been happy going to Austin. That's a deal breaker to me, right? Although it's an amazing job, amazing opportunity, get to do some really cool things. But if my family's not happy, how do you think Dr. Daywalker is going to be when he's doing all that? So I chose to do something that was equally aligned with my spirit of what I wanted to do in a space that my wife would have been happy with us kind of being at. So take those things in considerations and not get blinded by those dollars, because it's, at the end of the day, life is about meaning, purpose, happiness, and you want to factor all of that into the job.
Definitely. I think the having that job that's in alignment with that, rather than trying to focus on the other aspect, while also, getting compensated comfortably, but not going necessarily for the dollar. Thank you for that input. There's a question in the chat that Dr. Bray has already agreed to take on. Was there any difference between your expectation of your role would be and what it actually is?
Yeah, so my big difference in leading into this, just to talk what everyone's talking about, like all this stuff about like all these different terms, PTO and stuff like that, and like your pay and all. It's important no matter where you go. But any of you that are looking to go into private practice, I'll just warn you ahead of time, like it's not going to be as cut and dry as you thought. Because I was all prepped to get out there for like finding an academic job. And when I applied to my old med school or to the other family medicine residency that I was interested in working at in South Carolina, I was like, okay, great. And then the place I actually ended up, I wasn't sure like half the time, like, oh my God, like I'm not gonna be able to work. Like I want, like, again, Dr. Walker was there to hold me through it, about like, I'm asking about PTO and they're only talking about you get like 5 days or stuff like that. And like the pay is only $150,000 a year, and Medical University South Carolina's gonna give me $300,000. But to actually get around to your question, the big thing about the money is I'm chasing money, because, and I know we are all saying that in some way, but I also want to be very clear. These hospital systems, they think they're slick. They'll throw I did enough years at MUSC to know their games. So they're like, oh, we'll pay you $300,000, like $300,000 to sit in the clinic in North Charleston to be a referral machine. Something doesn't seem right. So they'll like push that forward to you, but then you kind of have to earn it back. Right. So for me, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm taking a big pay cut with what I'm doing, but cost of living is cheap in rural South Carolina. My mortgage for my house is cheaper than the rent I paid all through residency for my apartment. Right. So yeah, I'm making $150,000, but I feel like I'm living good. And as soon as I hit production, while I have this chance, and, in residency, I focused on health systems leadership and how to learn billing and all the finance and all that. and like, that's how we keep our doors open. We just bill like nobody else, but in a totally legal way, but getting everything we work for. So like, I got the timer running whenever I see my patient. Like, am I gonna bill for time or bill for complexity? Either way, I just can't wait for September next year because they go see that 150 gonna change real quick. But anyways, with all that, as I was trying to figure out what this job has going on, like I remember I was overwhelmed because I was in the FQ8C for residency and I saw my attendings like just work to death. Like we were burnt out as residents, they were burnt out as attendings. I'm like, help me, Jesus! Like, do I even want to be a doctor anymore? And and going into this job here, was explaining like, okay, like for instance, tomorrow I'll be in clinic from 8 to 5:30 or whatever. On Wednesday, I'll have calls. So like while I'm in clinic, I'll be on call if there's anything from our patients in the hospital and I'm responsible for that, or if any woman's laboring or anything. And then Thursday morning, I'll go and I'll round at the hospital, but then I have the rest of the day off after that. And then Friday morning, I'm back in at 8 to 5. And then if I'm on weekend call, like my colleague who I signed off to last Thursday, when I was on call, then, I'm rounding Friday morning, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm on call for all this. And I remember like telling that to people at my program in Massachusetts, and again, like I'm talking about a rural practice in South Carolina, and people were like, that is insane. For how much? For 150,000 a year? Is you stupid? Like was pretty much like the vibe I thought I was getting. So like I had a whole crisis of faith and everything coming into it, but I just felt like this was right. I had seen academics, I had seen FQHCs, I knew it wouldn't make me happy. So I was like, I'd rather just try something different and see what goes. And like y'all, like it's just been taking that jump has been the best thing that's happened to me because yeah, I technically only get like 5 days of PTO, but the way we do it, because we're a private practice and we can do what we want. Like my office manager always says, like, we're independent. I'm like, I just started in September. I've already had 2 vacation days and then they're helping me like schedule it to where I'm gonna have like 10 days straight off around Christmas. So I'm going to Hawaii. But anyways, like, just like different stuff like that, or even like, yeah, it's rural and, there's a lot of Medicaid, but because we're physician owned and there's like, and, we have a lot of us there helping, you're splitting the work. So it's not like when our most senior owner first started and he was having to do that call all the time, every time. So every 5 weekends, I got weekend call, which really isn't that bad because I can round in the hospital whenever I want. It's a small community hospital. The nurses know, like they try not to bother us. So they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm calling you, or whatever. Like it's great. And then when it actually plays out with our scheduling, at minimum, we have 20-minute visits. New patients get 40 minutes, like Medicare or CPEs and stuff get 60. But the thing is like, it's private practice. So you get what you kill. So I don't have to churn through folks. So like if you want to do nothing but 20-minute visits, boom, 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 and have an acute day and see upwards of 20 people, great. But if you want to take your time and do a bunch of 40 minutes, like complex follow-ups and, these complete physical exams, that's fine because you can bill more for it. Because one thing we won't do at Lovelace Family Medicine is underbill ourselves so much that like insurance companies have come to us be like, why do y'all do so many level 4s? I'm like, have you seen rural healthcare? That's why. So, it's been a pleasant surprise for me, but also I had learned from watching other people that kind of went the other route of like, oh, I'll join MUSC and this will be great. And then, I'm just watching them like claw their eyes out. Hope that answered your question.
Question, Priscilla. Any other questions or thoughts that have come up? Another question was, what has your experience different how has your experience differed in your role as a Black physician compared to your non-Black colleagues?
I really want to answer this, but I'll defer to somebody else to start.
I'm in private practice, so I'm it, and I'm the boss. And I do my one of my nurse practitioners is an elderly white male, and I can honestly say that he's respected my position as the owner and the medical director of the practice. And so I was only in FQHC for a year and a half. So in residency, I'm gonna be quiet. But I really can't answer that question because I'm on my own path right now.
Mhm. Dr. Harvey, can you speak specifically because you are a sole owner and you open your practice? It's like getting the capital to do that. Could you speak a little bit before we go back to that question?
Yeah, so I live very cheaply. When I was in residency, I was able to save $20,000 from moonlighting, and that's still with me being a little bit irresponsible with money. And then when I was working at the FQHC, some weekends I would do ER, sometimes I would do urgent care, and I was just putting that money in a saving. So when it was time to open up my private practice, I took okay. I try to be conservative with how much information I share, but this is family. But I took $30,000 out of my savings. I put it into a business account. It was a wonderful tax write-off.
Mhm.
And that's what we did. And for the first year, almost year, all of the money that came to my practice, because I didn't do credentialing. So I got a few checks, like credentialing hadn't went through for me, and I didn't understand how important it was because I just did it. And that's not smart. I'd have wonderful advice now for anyone that wants to go into private practice. But during that year, I was also moonlighting in the ER, and I was doing a little bit of urgent care. So I had 3 jobs. And so the money that I made from the ER, you make like $210,000. I mean, $210 per hour. I was doing sometimes 12, 24-hour shifts. And so once again, wonderful write-off because that was going back into my business account and payroll, everything. And so after that, it was like I had just had my baby February 27th, and I was on maternity leave. I hired the first nurse practitioner to come work for my office. And all of the checks from when I first opened just started rolling in. It was like the blood of Jesus because I honestly did not know, I knew it wasn't doable for me to be a mom the way I wanted to, and to also leave Dr. K's and then go to the ER, then go back to Dr. K's and finally go home. And so, luckily I didn't have to do a business plan. Like I told you, I am a lazy hard worker. So I didn't have to do a business plan. I just took the money that I saved, I put it into my business, and it has returned. I can say within the 7 years that we've been open, we've generated over $2 million in revenue. Now that's not what our bank account says now because of payroll, everything else, but it was worth the investment. So yeah, but for everyone else, you have to come up with a business plan. You have to go to the bank. You actually have to, if you decide, I think the best thing that you can ever do is use your own money because sometimes, like I said, all I did was 30,000. So I had one medical assistant, a front desk receptionist. That was it.
Mm.
Now I have 6.5 employees under me. I have one person who's working part-time. And so, yeah, that's kind of it.
I appreciate that in the transparency because I think it's really important for us to share, to know what's possible, as well as what it takes to get that off of the ground. Because as many of the panelists have talked about, like flexibility and ownership is so important to us so that we can prioritize other aspects of our life that is just as important. And so I want to bring back that question that was brought up if Dr. Daywalker or Bray wanted to also answer that question.
So I just want to speak to that because like I just put in the chat answer another question. When the practice I joined, it's 5 docs, 4 of them that were like rounded in the hospital and doing OB. So I became the 5th guy for that. So now we're 6 docs and then 3 nurse practitioners. And I'm the only Black guy in the office. And Newberry, South Carolina is like 50-50 Black, white, very similar to Walsboro, South Carolina, where I grew up. And I've seen a difference in a couple different ways. One, there have been many times that, when y'all know when there's a difficult patient and the staff kind of talks about them, like, oh, you're seeing Mr. Jones next, good luck with that, right? Our patient has just seemed to like one of the NPs that I have a desk next to, like she's really great. She grew up here and I know she's like a very like she's an advocate for folks from, from this community and stuff. And there'll be people, she's like, I swear I have tried to get through to them and I don't know what it is. It's like, it's like, I don't even think it's a this thing, that thing. Like we grew up in the same neighborhood. Like, I don't know what it is. The only difference really is that she's white and they're not. And then I would see that patient and I always joke with my wife, hey, so where me and Dr. Walker went to residency, we all learned Spanish. And I joke with my wife, it's like, I guess because in this one I went and I spoke African-American vernacular English, but like something just clicks. And I don't know if it's really because like when I go in that room, I'm just talking to them like they're my cousin or something like that. Not like, oh, this is Dr. Bray. Just like, now you ain't supposed to put that much sugar in your sweet tea. And it's just like, it just hits home. And so that's one thing I've noticed. It's like, I feel like I've had success with what were said to be difficult patients. And I really think it's just because because it's like that race concordant, language concordant care. But then also the patients themselves have said that, I've been doing child health checks and, the mom's like, it's really good to see a Black doctor here, and stuff like that. And for, for our kids to see, or one lady almost got me the other day. She's an older Black lady. And she's like, in this practice that I work as, like, is about 30 something years old. And I meet a lot of what I call OG patients that love telling me that they've been there since day one. And she was like, I've been coming to this practice for 20 something years. And you're the first Black doctor I've seen here. It feels like when Obama got elected. And I was just like, I ain't gonna cry in front of you, lady. And then walked out the room. But so for me, it's just really filled my cup because, I remember what it was growing up and like no other kids that look like me wanted to be a doctor, even though we all had like moms that were nurses and stuff like that. And I know what it was like going back to speak to my high school and stuff, and no one in the room wanted to be a doctor because they didn't see any of us that looked like doctors, but they wanted to be like respiratory therapists and like patient care techs and stuff. And there's like things that high school kids should not know about, but I knew they only knew about because they had relatives that looked like them that were doing that. So to know that like I'm here and, there's like, this little 3-year-old that I argue with every time he comes in because he don't stop picking his nose, even though he's always trying to swing on me by the end of the visits, like I feel confident knowing that maybe 10 years from now, he'd be like, hey, Dr. Bray, can I shadow you? And I take full advantage of that. I called up my cousin the other day. She lives 2 hours away. She wants to be a pediatrician. Like, what you doing over Christmas break? You want to shadow me? So like I've noticed that difference, and it's just been a godsend, and it's really been confirmation to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yes, thank you for that. I want to acknowledge that we are 10 minutes over. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here. It sounds like there's a lot of additional conversations that we are gonna need to have in the future. But we would like to get feedback from you all that have participated. And so I'm going to launch our post-session poll just to let us know how we were doing and how we can always work to improve. And then also with that, I just want to let you all know a few things that are going on with ABFMP. We're going to have our town hall on December 11th, which is also a Sunday at 7 p.m. And it's just a time for you guys to join in, for us to socialize, hear about updates with ABFMP, and just from us to hear from you all. So keep that in mind as well. And I'll share the information that we have if you want to take a picture, but of course it'll always be with our promotions and things like that. So keeping that in line. And then also we acknowledge that we are in the season of giving as Thanksgiving is coming upon us. And so we have been working hard at ABFMP, but we now have Amazon Smiles. And so if you're doing any early shopping or anything like that, add on Amazon Smile. You can find everything on our website so that, if you're shopping and through Amazon specifically, we can get some proceeds from that, and it's no additional cost to you all. We really value you all's input. So if you may, please do the post-session poll, and we hope to see you at the town hall, and to continue planning so that you all are getting the information that you all need so that you all can make the careers that you want for yourselves. Additional thing that I will add, I know we weren't talking about me, but I think when we talk about flexibility in our jobs, it's also realizing that you could just work part-time. So this was something that I valued. I was more so required to work at a family at a FQHC or a community hospital, and it was by choice. But there was definitely some questions afterwards. But I realized that, you know, for me, it was best to work part-time. So always that is an option. And really asking those questions about how you can make your job flexible and setting those expectations before you start. And so I'm happy to say that I start my job tomorrow. But
Dr. Walker, you're frozen.
I can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back.
Sorry, that's my computer, my whoops. But you know, I do like a day and a half of continuity. I do acutes. I'm doing also obesity medicine. I just took my boards last Wednesday. Dr. Harvey, so I wish you all the good luck. I know you're gonna do amazing. You've been doing this work for so long. And I just feel like I already have a good team because we've been able to communicate ahead of time and set those expectations. So that's all I got to say for that. I hope you all found this helpful. Again, please fill out the poll. That is helpful for us to kind of know how we're doing. So we appreciate that. Any last questions, words? We still have Dr. Harvey and Dr. Bray here, but I do want to respect their time.
Taking a break from NFL football today, so I got time.
I know how you love your football. All right. If you haven't finished the poll, it seems like a few people are still maybe working on it. But other than that, that's all we have for you all today. Priscilla, you mentioned there was a question. I missed it. Can you tell me which one it was? Would you think of looking into starting your own while in residency and have others working for you? I think it's related specifically to private practice. Do you have any suggestions on that, Dr. Harvey, about preparing
No,
while
don't
in
do
residency?
it. Don't do it because you have to like having your own practice is like having a kid. Like even before you go to work, you have to think about it while you're there. You're completely there. Then after you leave, you have to look at numbers. You have to do the management. You have to make sure the manager's doing their job, and then you also have to be willing to hire and fire people, which can be emotionally draining. In residency, I think that's like hazing to become a doctor to me. And so, no, definitely not. Just wait till you're finished because it's going to require more than your time, than more than a 9 to 5 and more than a 12 to 12 shift. So just focus on residency while you're there.
Definitely. Also, could you
I
share
want
the
to echo
book
that.
that
Sorry.
thank you.
Later.
The book that you read, Dr. Harvey, it seemed to change your life. Maybe we should read it. About private practice that your mom gave you. You remember?
Yeah, so that's the funny story. So it did not change my life because she sent
Oh,
it to me and I took it and I was like, why is she sending me this? And I
okay.
put it on my bookshelf. Like I would have never thought, it was just what changed my life was the FQHC, how I was treated there. And, I kept telling, people at the time, I forget what was going on politically, but everyone was on this own your own, start a Black business. And I kept telling people at my FQHC, because it was mostly people who looked like me at the center I worked at. I was like, yeah, one day I'm gonna open my own business and, it's gonna give me passive income. And people were like, why don't you open up your own practice? I was like, people don't make money doing that. And then the next thing you know, I met someone who does credentialing. The next thing you know, I found this free EHR. And then it just kept rolling out with just these confirmations that this is the direction that I wanted to go in. And I always remember that, people always talk about right now manifesting, you have to visualize this. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. But I also think that, some things that belong to you or that are supposed to happen to you, the universe, your path, is just gonna, just hit you dead smack dab in the face. And then you're just gonna start walking that path and other things are gonna start rolling out to continue on the path you're supposed to be in. Because no one could have ever told me. I still have the book, still have not read it. And I should have I was having a hard time my first year. But it's amazing how we make our own plans, but the universe, God, whoever you believe in, sometimes just have different plans.
Mhm. Definitely. And what was the name of the conference that you mentioned before that helped you a lot?
Yes, National Conference of Constituency Leaders. So NCCL, it's a conference by the AAFP to get you minority physicians, women, LGBTQIA physicians involved and more active, and also help them create resolutions. So when you're there, you get to network. And like I said, there was one other female physician who was going into private practice. And so we got the opportunity to compare notes. And we wrote a resolution for the AAFP to basically develop a private practice toolkit, because we didn't know what we were doing
Mm.
and that we felt like they should have that. So they actually have that now, on their website or what have you. So
Great, great.
That's really dope because I've used that toolkit.
Nice. Any last words, Dr. Bray?
Well, one, I just wanted to second Dr. Harvey's thing about like, don't start your own in residency. I mean, now that being said, if you do want to have yourself a little side income in residency, I don't mind talking to you on how you can turn your passions into a paycheck. But because that's kind of led me to my whole like consulting business that is like now becoming more and more of a thing. But anyways, and I just also wanted to second Dr. Harvey's bit about like, if it's meant for you, it'll be for you. Like I said, like I took a leap of faith coming out here, and where I went to residency, besides doing OB, like I said, they taught us Spanish. I learned how to treat people for addictions with Suboxone, learned how to do HIV management and stuff. And like, these are things I didn't know that I would, that I'd be able to do. And talking to the guys that own the clinic, like, oh, I don't know, we'll see. There's not really a lot of Spanish people, we'll see. Yo, Spanish people are finding me. I like, because as many Spanish people, I was like, now y'all told me there were no Spanish people here. And I spent half this day speaking Spanish, or, even with the Suboxone and medication assisted therapy thing, we're trying to figure it out. I'm talking to folks at the hospital that I run, and case management's like, oh yeah, there's a big opioid problem. We would love to have someone that prescribes Suboxone. I'm walking out the daggone Walmart, and there's a dude with an opioid like recovery center doing like selling bracelets for a fundraiser, and they're opening up like a detox center in the same little town that I work in and stuff. Is like, well, it looks like we need Suboxone providers, right? And then with the HIV thing, rounding on a patient this weekend, like he doesn't take his meds. Why doesn't he take his meds? Because he can't afford the ride down to Columbia to the Ryan White Clinic. I'm like, well, I could do HIV medicine. He could just come see me at the office. What in the world is going on? And I find out the hospital doesn't even have HIV beds for treatment. I'm like, well, this is going to be a thing to fix. Like, so just like a year ago, or even like, shoot, honestly, 6 months ago, I thought I was going to go. I thought I was finding everything was a lie and I'd be burnt out. And then, I'd be like, telling Dr. Walker how I'm going to law school and just like, I don't know, chasing my political dreams or something. And now at this point, like I'm living the dream, and it's great. And I've got a good group to do it with, learning a lot. So just keep believing in yourself, because I like, sorry to like go too much, but like that has been like the biggest lesson in 22 for me. And one big thing that hit me was my mom just texted me one day and she's like, you have always marched to the beat of your own drum and it's worked out. So sometimes you just got to be a little weird. And as long as you're being true to yourself, it'll work.
Yeah, and Dr. Walker said, Dr. Day Walker, he was saying, bet on yourself. So you got to invest in yourself, and that means financially, but also with knowledge and seeking out those resources so that you can develop your craft. And you guys have ABFMP too. So, but I'm going to go ahead and end it. Thank you all again so much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their knowledge and experience. This is really great. And I feel like I've learned a few key tips as I'm like, oh, I'm going into my job tomorrow because I've been off for 5.5 months. So I'm excited as well to start embarking on this journey of being in my career. So thank you all, and just keep a watch out for everything that's coming up. All righty. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dr. Walker.